Hello and welcome to another episode of A Veteran's Point of View. Again, I am your host, Mario. Guys, wow, I can't believe this, guys. It has been 20 years since I first put foot in Iraq. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my stories, some of the things, some of the hardships, some of the things that were a bit hard for me to digest. Obviously, I'm not going to go into detail about a lot of stuff because, we also did a lot of stuff that, in many cases, to this day, is still classified. So, cannot really talk in depth into a lot of stuff. But we will talk a little bit about my life experiences, how the first of three deployments that I did to Iraq, how they changed me over time, how they have made me a better and a worse person in the long run, and obviously just give you guys my perspective on things. Now, understand that every combat veteran has suffered in many ways. Some will use different tactics or different ways of doing things to alleviate their pain or to not think about war, because unfortunately, for as much as it affects us, we try to bury it and not let it be part of us. It does have a tendency of always being part of us and affecting us in many, many ways. So, I don't even know where to start on this matter, but I will try to be as candid as I can with you. I will try to tell you what my feelings and my thought processes were on a lot of things, and I would also, hope that you guys really understand the damage that it does to a person when they go to combat. It's just, unfortunately, you are no longer the same person that you left, and it's something that in many cases we have a tendency of trying to think that there's nothing wrong with us, but there is. So I want to try not to go too much in depth, and I'll try not to ramble on a lot about things, but let's start with the first one. The first one is, how does war change you? I think in many cases, war will always change you, and it'll change the way you do things and the way you are. Because in many cases, you are looking at traumatic things in your life. You're going to see a lot of death. You're going to see a lot of last minute stuff that in some cases has a wear and tear. The hurry up and wait from the military. Especially when it matters most, when you're in combat or you're in overseas deployment. It just takes a different type of stress, and this type of stress is it's unavoidable. It's part of who we are and how we do things. But I would tell you that the number one thing for me was understanding that at any time while I was in Iraq, I could have gotten killed. And in many cases, there were so many times where I should have been killed. I'll be honest with you. I mean, for many of those that have been in combat would tell you that the sound of a 7.62 round buzzing your head, that sound will never ever go away. Being able to see a friend or even a civilian, being hit by shrapnel, being shot by a machine gun, it's very traumatic, And the thing about it is, the military, whether they really don't want to admit it or not, they do create an aspect of us that it's really hard for civilians to understand. Of course, the the purpose of the military is to win wars, and in many cases, to win wars by any means necessary. And in some cases, we have a tendency of, bringing that training into whatever we do. I can remember going through Fort Benning and then later on going through Fort Knox, because I did 2 basic trainings. Don't ask me how that happened, but I did because I have 2 MOSs. But to make a long story short, we had a tendency that whenever we did anything, the word kill was mentioned. Certain things that were engraved in our heads, suck it up and drive on, man up, you're the next man up. Let's go do what you got to do, suck it up and drive on, all these little terms, whether you believe it or not, they have a tendency of ingraining you, and they do all have a meaning into it because we see it, we see how this affects us. And I'm now going back into being in first day in country. And of course, my first patrol, actually, let me go back. As soon as we arrived at the forward observation, Kalsu in Iraq, and by the way, this is Kalsu before it was actually constructed the way it was towards the end. Because I know there's a lot of you guys out there that might have been in Kalsu when it had a runway, like, you can actually land a C-130 in that sucker, and it had like nicer facilities and all that. Well, the Kalsu that I was in, we actually relieved the 82nd Airborne. I believe it was a 502nd or 504th one too. I can't recall which unit it was. But to make a long story short, we were living in GP medium tents, and these things had like this wood structure around it, but they were horribly made. The floor was kind of decaying and all kinds of stuff. The tents were all saggy, and and nothing was reinforced. And we had this one huge generator. And this generator would always shut off whenever we needed it the most. So whenever it got to 120 or something like that, it would shut off because it needed to cool down because it was too hot. There was no shade on this thing, so it had a tendency of overheating really quick. And that was our life. We were living in a GP medium tent, and it was hot as hell. Getting shot at, and all we had was a bunch of walls of sandbags. They were there to protect us, and we used to get mortar every day, guys, every day. Anyways, going back I'm sorry, I'm just rambling all over the place on this thing. Going back to my first day in Iraq, you get there, and our welcoming party throws maybe 20 or 30 mortars at us. We ended up having to go to the bunker and all that kind of stuff. And that was our first day in Iraq. And to this day, I will never forget it. And I remember that. And I remember they was telling us that we were going to have a night patrol. And, like the hairs on my back went up, like, oh my God, like that situational awareness, and that, I don't know how to really explain it, but it's maybe like your whole senses go up, and you have a tendency of like, it's kind of like if you ever play football, if any of you guys ever play football or any organized football or organized sport, and you're getting ready to go onto the field for your game, and you have that nervousness like that. It's the best way for me to describe it. And that's kind of like how we felt. But of course, in this aspect, we could have been killed. And, you do all your rehearsals prior to you going on patrol. You double check, triple check your equipment, making sure that everybody understands the mission, all that good stuff. and away we go in our first mission, right? I can still recall it to this day. I was actually not even supposed to be manning a 50 cal, but what happened is that one of our guys had not showed up yet, and we were short of a gunner. And I was, already certified and all that good stuff for a 50 cal. And my platoon sergeant said, "Hey, I'm gonna need you on top of the 50." And I was like, "Okay, no problem," And I can still recall. I know for a fact that in many ways, once we left the wire, and when we say the wire is when you leave the forward observation base and you leave the friendly confines of your forward observation base, you're out of the wire, that's what it really means. And you go out and do your patrols. As soon as you leave the wire, you're like, all right, it's on. Let's do it. But at the same time, you're no longer like super nervous anymore. It's like this calmness comes into your body and you're like, okay, I'm accepting it. I'm accepting what I'm about to do. And if, God forbid, I need to do whatever I need to do, then I'm sure that, God and my instincts will guide me through. So going through our first patrol, and we're halfway through it, and we ended up going through this kind of ravine area, lowering down to the canals. And by the way, if you never heard anything about or know the topographical ways of how Iraq is, there's a lot of water canals in Iraq everywhere, and that's kind of their way of being able to redirect their gray water. And unfortunately, a lot of that gray water ends up going into the Euphrates River and all the surrounding water basins. So it's pretty nasty, But anyways, going back into this, we ended up going through a ravine, going down towards a lower area, and all of a sudden we get engaged, and we actually got ambushed, and we got ambushed hard, guys. I was the second vehicle in the convoy. We had 4 vehicles, and I was the second vehicle in the convoy. The first vehicle got hit with rapid fire, and they returned fire, and then all of a sudden I started taking fire to the left of me, and all I can recall is moving over my 50 cal and just start shooting towards the area of the flashes that were coming through. And it's kind of weird, guys. I don't even know how to really explain it. The flashes of the machine guns that are shooting at me, I just reacted right away. But at the same time, I know I could hear a faint sound. And if you guys ever seen a Humvee, it has a tendency where the gunner's at, there's like a big large plate, and that's kind of like to protect them from small arms fire. And all I can hear is a lot of ping pings all over the plating that was around there. And I just kept going is redirecting, going through my 3 to 5 second burst with the 50 cal, and then going through one box, and then going through another box. And to be honest with you, this firefight went on for like 10-15 minutes. By the time I was done, I had gone through 8 cans of freaking 50 cal. So, and it was crazy. It was just like, one thing that I can remember is how fast I got to reload a can of ammo, and I remember just having such a hard time with it sometimes, because if you guys ever know it, the location of where the ammo bin is at is kind of, it's a bit cumbersome, so getting to it sometimes would become a little hard. And I'm a short guy. I'm only 5'6", so I don't have the long arms like a lot of people do, so I had to reach in there. And while getting fired, I didn't even think about that, man. It was just this reaction that I had, that I know that I had to reload my can of ammo and start shooting again. And like I tell you, this firefight went on for to me, it felt like a lifetime. But from what I gather and the things that we saw afterwards, it only went on for like 5 or 7 minutes, and the aftermath was obviously very gruesome. A 50 cal round, guys, even if you're like within 3 or 4 feet near it, it can actually decapitate you because of the force of the round. And in some cases, it may sound exaggerating, but maybe not decapitate you, but it'll hurt you because the force of that round is so great. You got to stop and think about it. A 50 cal round can go 2-3 miles, and it's a very high power round, guys. It's a huge round. If you guys ever seen a 50 cal round, you'll notice that it's a pretty beastly round, and especially when you see it being shot out of a Barrett sniper rifle, and you see that dust that comes out of it when you shoot it. Just think about doing that on a platform on top of a Humvee, and you're shooting away with it. From what I remember, guys, I remember a lot of gruesome stuff because I could tell a little bit through the night sights. I remember turning on my night sights and being able to see pieces of bodies and stuff, because in many cases, the 50 cal just shredded to people. And I hope I don't, gross you guys, but it is war. And I could tell you guys that it bothered me. It bothered me that I had to do that, but to a certain point, I also remember a promise I made my kids. And that is that Daddy was going to come home, and he was going to come home alive. He wasn't going to come in a box. And, that's a hell of a thing to say to a kid, And I remember telling my kids, I am not coming home in a box. I will be back. And being able to, keep that promise is always, it's always gratifying, but at the same time, you really don't stop and think about the actual act of it and having to do the things that you do to make those kind of promises, But, yeah. And, of course, this is just a small tidbit of what happened that night. We continue going through our patrols, still continue to be ready if we encounter any more enemies. From what I gathered and from what intelligence that we got from the 82nd Airborne, if you guys recalled, we told you guys that we actually relieved the 82nd Airborne, but they actually had a trailing party, and a trailing party consisted of a couple of military intelligence officers. And when we did our briefing, and when we came back from the forward observation base, or the FOB, they pretty much let us know what the actions were of the enemy. In many cases, they were, they wanted to see what your capabilities are. Are you going to shoot back when they shoot at you, kind of thing? And of course, that's any enemy. They wanna know how formidable you are. How much are you willing to fight back? And yeah, that's exactly what happened. And it's one of those things that continue to happen every day in Iraq. Our FOB was actually an old Iraqi radio transmission station. It had these huge, towering antennas on top, And we kept telling the chain of command, we need to get rid of these things because you know, just based on that, they can pretty much triangulate where our living quarters are at, and they can lob mortars or rockets at us and kill our guys, you know. And unfortunately, you know, we had to find out the hard way. But of course, that's for another episode. This is just the talking to you guys a little bit about my first night in Iraq and what I went through. So, as I was saying, we went through that first night. We finished our patrol. We did our briefing. By the time everything was done, it was like 3 a.m, and I was tired. And at the same time, you know, I had to kind of reflect on the moment. I really did, because it was gruesome, the things that I saw. And at the same time, I also felt like, you know, I took people's lives away. But at the same time, I was thinking, well, these guys are trying to kill me, so I'd rather kill them before they do that to me. And in many cases, you're just trying to justify the things that you're doing. You know, you gotta self-analyze what you think is best for you, or it's just basically finding a way for you to cope with reality. Oh my God, I can't even talk right now. Oh my God, I'm sorry, guys. But just the realities of war, you know, and how this has a tendency of affecting people. You know, I pretty much started thinking about, you know, like, what are the actions that I took? What are some of the things that I could have done better? You know, and in many cases, you know, we do what we call an after action review after any mission. And basically, I was doing the same thing to myself all over again after that was done. You know, because in many cases, guys, and this is something I didn't really talk about when I first started this whole storytelling, is that a month and a half prior to that, I had just gotten promoted to sergeant. And you guys can just imagine the type of responsibilities that I had. You know, I had a group of 6 that were my responsibility. It was something that I was not used to it, but at the same time, I had to do it, and I had to learn really quick, because in reality, these soldiers' lives were in my hands. You know, and it's a huge responsibility for you to have, you know. So at the same time, you have a tendency of beating yourself up a lot. You have a tendency of, you know, questioning, am I doing the right thing? You know, and those are the things that are part of who you are as a leader, you know. And yeah, those are kind of like the same thought processes that I was going through, and you know, making sure that I was doing the right thing. I always had a tendency of questioning a lot of things that I did, because, like I said, you know, you have people's lives that you are protecting, and you want to make sure that you're a good leader, and you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And that is pretty much my first night in Iraq. It was a long patrol, and this patrol really consisted of us really getting to know our AO, or our area of operations, because we wanted to know, you know, what are some of the areas in which an enemy can attack you. What are some of the things that we could do to improve our defense mechanisms? You know, how far are they from our forward observation base? Can they lob mortars from where we're at? Can they lob rockets? You know, like, looking, basically, you're doing a lot of these patrols and you're thinking like the enemy, and you start wondering, like, what are some of the areas in which we could be effective if we were attacking ourselves, you know? And that's kind of like the same mentality you're going through. And of course, there's the other mentality of innocent lives and civilian lives, and how you will affect those, and those are things that you are really being very conscious about. And of course, the ROE, or the rules of engagement, making sure that you are following the rules of engagement. Are you doing the right thing? Are you within what the Army is wanting you to do as far as your rules of engagement? And all these things have a tendency of just popping into your head as you're going through, so you have 1,000 things that you're trying to process and do as you're doing all this stuff, And not only that, but then, before you go out to the mission, you do your mission briefing. And the mission briefing is pretty much going on detail about every mission, and not just one platoon or anything like that. It's talking about like the whole company and what they are doing, and what are the after action reviews or actions that may be. What are some of the scenarios if for some reason you get IED'd, how to get out of the kill zone, all these things that, you train and train before you get there, and now you have to do it for real. So all these things were popping in my head, guys. And those are the things that I will never forget. I will never forget the stressors that went through it. I will never forget the smells. I will never forget a lot of the things that I experienced, because in reality, these are the things that now affect me. For example, burning trash. If for some reason there's any kind of burning trash, I actually live just in the outer rim of my city, and my city happens to be it's a farm town. I live in Bakersfield, California. So if you guys know anything about Bakersfield, it's a big city, but there's a lot of farmland that surrounds it. Now, farmers still have a tendency of burning trash because in many ways they just feel it's more effective. They can get through it real quick. And in most cases, that smell will trigger me. It'll trigger me real bad, to the point that it's hard for me to function and stuff like that, because then all these things that I went through in Iraq start coming to my head, and it's kind of weird, anything like big crowds have a tendency of bothering me, for so many other aspects. And I will get more into detail. I have a lot of more other Iraq stories that I want to tell you guys, but I definitely wanted to kind of touch bases with you on my first night in Iraq and how that felt. Now, actually living in a fob was probably one of the hardest things that, you definitely have to endure. Like I was saying, we lived in a GP medium tent. Now, these tents are made of this really thick, I don't know, they're nylon or whatever the case may be, but it's like real thick canvas. And you can stop and think about that. Plus, it's 100 degrees outside, or 100 plus. And you have a generator that works half of the time. And you got these ACs that are cranking like crazy. And, and of course, through the middle of the day, of the hottest day, it just turns off. And you might be so tired, man, because, you've been training, you've been doing all these things just to prepare for your missions, that by the time you're getting ready to go to bed, you're exhausted, man. And this type of exhaustion that I've ever had is nothing like I've never ever encountered, man. Like, I was exhausted, man, And to top it off, as you're trying to sleep, the enemy has a tendency of knowing that, and they take the advantage of it. So they'll start shooting mortar rounds at your base. They'll start shooting rockets at your base. And it has a tendency of taking its toll on you, because you're having to go to your bunker, having to put on a vest, having to put a Kevlar, which is a helmet, and all this stuff. And, and you're not getting any sleep, and you're really tired and irritated. and it kind of like triggers you to the point that you're like, anything anybody says is kind of stupid. You just have a tendency of going off on people, or you're so tired and you take on this rage whenever you're having to deal with civilians, and that's really part of our life, and it's just one of those things that will always affect you, because these things have a tendency of really hurting you as you start transitioning out of the war zone and back home. And I will talk a little bit more about the other issues that I've had once I came back home, and how I was, dealing with it as best as I could. But unfortunately, it just was a little bit overwhelming for me. So I will tell you guys a little bit about my stories of what I did to kind of help myself with my mental health. But these are for other stories and other stories for me to tell you guys. So this is pretty much, I know I kind of like rambled on all over the place, and I hope that you guys were able to kind of at least capture a little bit about what that first night was for me. It was really nerve-wracking. It was mixed with a lot of emotions. There was just a lot of stuff going on that first night, and it had a tendency of affecting me for the rest of my first deployment, to the point that even every other deployment that I've ever had, it always affected me, because a lot of those thoughts, it always came back. And I think it's just because of that was my first trauma, the first time really dealing with a lot of this stuff. So, that's what ended up happening, guys. So I apologize if I kind of rambled on. I apologize if I kind of lost you in the process. But I kind of wanted to let you guys know how I felt. Let you know what my thought processes were and how I dealt with a lot of this stuff here. So I really hope that you guys get something out of this. I hope that you enjoyed my story. And of course, there'll be more to follow on these type of stories, because I think they need to be told. The more we the more we express ourselves, I think the more civilians will definitely start understanding our processes and our sacrifices, and they can better help us. So I'm doing all this because I really want some better awareness from our community, from our society, because I still feel that there's a lot of there's definitely a lot that needs to be learned about us and what we go through. All right, guys, I really hope that you guys enjoy my my story here. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to my podcast. And please continue to support this podcast. We are here to, give the stories of our veterans, making sure that others know about the sacrifices of our veterans. So I am working on some special guests. Please don't think I have forgotten about that. I am working on those. So please stay tuned. And like always, guys, God bless you. God bless United States of America. And I'm out.